So if you're in this video right now and watching, this is a call out for Israel, for you to wake up, because we don't have much time. And I'm not trying to sound an alarm and be an alarmist or anything like that, but there's just some things we need to understand about Christianity from where we came from and how we just need to just ditch it and ditch it fast. So maybe some of you have watched other videos and been exposed to, how the New Testament was written and why it was written, and, the families that were behind writing the New Testament. But if you're not aware of that, then I am going to go over that information so you get a clear picture as to how fake the New Testament is and how Christianity is all made up. All right, so hold on to your pants. Don't be upset, and let's get started on this, okay? All right, so how and why did the Roman Piso family write the New Testament? The Jews, who were tired of being ruled over by the Roman aristocracy, were led in their third great revolt against Rome since 6 CE into 60 CE by Benjamin the Egyptian of the Pharisaic party. Though they were defeated by the Romans knew that they had to do something. So about the year 60, certain people were getting together to plan to regain control of the Jewish masses. So there was Seneca, the rhetorician, Lucius Piso, Gaius Piso, and their relatives figured to give the Jews a new rhetorical religion. So they had to do something. They were obviously not gaining control, the Romans, and panicked. So Lucius Piso, with assistance from Seneca, wrote Marcus thereabouts that year. And do some research on that. Marcus is the original book of Mark, but then they changed it, and we have what we have today. But originally, it was Marcus. They got rid of that and then made the book of Mark. They had much planned around this new religion, right? With their first book, they had hoped to start a new messianic Jewish religion. So when you really think about it, you have, Christianity, and out of Christianity, there's the messianic movement right now, which is, if you watched my video before on how we deconverted, that's kind of the basket we fell into, because we realized Christianity, there was, with all the paganism in it, it was just coming out. We knew something wasn't right, and we knew we need to go back to the Torah and follow God's commands. Like, they weren't nailed on the cross. They weren't nailed anywhere. They are still standing. That covenant with God is forever. And so we went into the messianic religion. So the original plan was for the Jews to ease into this messianic religion by adding Jesus in there. Initially, that would make them idolaters right away, and they would fall away from their Jewish heritage, which that's what ended up happening. And then it just went into full-blown Christianity after that, because once the fall happens and once you go into that avenue and traverse down that rabbit hole, it just gets all out of whack, and then you end up with Christianity. So, though the aristocratic Jewish hierarchy, the Herodians, were anxious to regain control of the masses through the new religion, Nero had not approved of it. So Nero's mistress was pro-Jewish, and he wanted to avoid a war with the Jewish zealots, which were the Pharisees. But most of all, he was angry because this side of his family had undertook this without his knowledge or approval. So obviously Nero did not approve of this. So what happened was, in 65 CE, they conspired against Nero. One of the conspirators turned informer. So Milichus, sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names, told Nero told Nero who the chief conspirators were, and Nero quickly retaliated, ordering the deaths of Seneca and Gaius Piso, among others. Nero spared Gaius Piso's son, Arius. Remember that name, it's going to become very important. But sent him to Syria to serve in exile. Arius Piso commanded Syria, gathered forces of support, and instigated war with the Pharisees. All right, so that name, just remember that name, because it's going to come up very often. The Jews were not buying his uncle's story. His father was dead. Nero didn't approve of it, so Arius, his uncle, adopted him and therefore became the father of the person that would play Jesus. They figured to destroy the Jews and rebuild Romanized Judaism without the Jews, which they did. And they would even use Nero to help do it, until Nero got wise to what they were doing. And then Nero ordered his apparently faithful general and relative Corbulo, Corbulo, just in case you want to look this up yourself, to commit suicide. So in 66 CE, Nero exiled Arius Piso again for trying to start war with the Jewish zealots, Pharisees, in order that Nero would back him in his attempt to destroy the temple in Jerusalem. This time, Arius was exiled to the Roman province of Pannonia in Central Europe, away from Syria and the Jews. Arius Piso had Epaphroditus, Nero's slave, to kill Nero for him in 68. All right, so you could probably do some research on Nero and, his death and so forth. Okay, that's just a brief history of what happened to Nero. But he was actually trying to squash this whole plan. Galba became emperor. So Galba was a direct descendant of Augustus Caesar and father of Otho. Galba named Licinius Frugi, F-R-U-G-I, Piso, P-I-S-O, as his successor instead of his son, Otho. Galba was overthrown in that same year by his son, Otho, who was overthrown by another family member, Vitellius. Vitellius was the father-in-law of Julius Gnaeus, G-N-A-E-U-S, Agricola. Agricola was the father-in-law of Justus Piso, Claudia Phoebe, Domitia Paulina the First, T. Flavius Clemens, and Cornelius Tacticus. It was Arius Piso himself who succeeded in defeating Vitellius, thereby securing Rome for Vespasian. Vespasian, in turn, helped Arius to destroy the temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 CE. Okay, so, we're just tying everything together here so you guys get an understanding of how these events started to happen and then, why they did what they did. So Vespasian already had his son Titus laying siege on Jerusalem, so Arius could go with his legions to finish up the job. But they weren't finished with the Jews yet. For Arius, it was fairly clear sailing from here, for he and the Flavian side of his family owned the entire known world. He inherited title to all the books in the library in Alexandria, Egypt, so that was around 100 BCE. Total of books in the Ptolemaic library was over half a million. So that's why, if you look back in history, why the Library of Alexandria was so important. I mean, you're obviously, you see 100 BCE prior, that's when they started collecting books and writings and all this information was there at this library, and they burned it down. Years later, obviously. All right, so over 500,000 books. That's pretty impressive. So Arius also had all the books in Judea, and he started gathering up books in Rome so that he could rewrite history. So who rewrites history? The winners do. Once he obtained all the books, he could, either by buying them or confiscating them, he burned all but certain books. He jokes about this in Acts 19:19. I'm not going to read the verses to you. If you want to see the verses, you can go yourself into the New Testament, look at it, but they're direct references to what he's done. And that's what they did. It was kind of like a joke on us, right? So the Pisos maintain a barrage of slave scribes to, skirt out propaganda against the Jews. And that happens even to today. While the first books of the New Testament were only mildly giving inferences against the Jews, the New Testament became increasingly anti-Semitic. And I'm sorry, but if you're a Christian and you're reading the New Testament it's pretty obvious. And especially if you're, one of the awakening of Israel, you notice that. I mean, the New Testament is just, it paints the Jews look so bad. And there was a reason for that, obviously. So Arius Piso wallowed in rhetoric devices. He played the part of his enemies by writing as Josephus. So Arius Piso, pen name, is Josephus. And at the same time, making up the Jesus character, whom he was also playing. So he was playing both roles. So both both Josephus and the New Testament are full of names and allusions to relatives and ancestors. That's all it is. They wanted us to be able to reconstruct, their lineage. They wanted to be able to reconstruct their lineage and the parts in which they played in the great battle. So they were really playing with the Jews, playing with their writings, and really it was just a mockery. The New Testament is a mockery against the Jews, and you'll see further as I go through my research how different rabbis that they were mocking at the time, how they wrote them into the New Testament, just crazy stuff. Gaius Piso, who was put to death by suicide by Nero, was the father of Arius Piso. So you can see the beef there, right, between Arius and Nero. When Arius' father died, his uncle Lucius, Gaius Piso's brother, married his mother, Miriamne, Aria the younger. Arius' mother was a daughter of T. Flavius Severus II, Vespasian's brother. So Josephus Flavius, get it? See the connections here? And the elder Aria. So Arius Josephus was already a Flavian. He was already a Flavian. But wait, other historians mention Christ or Christians, don't they? Let's take a look at them. Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, and Suetonius. Tacitus was married to Flavia Domitilla III after T. Flavius Clemens was killed by Domitian. I think that Tacitus, who was a son or half-son of Nerva, form of Nero, and a cousin of Trajan, and thereby also a nephew of Ortho. If so, then his mother was Ortho's sister, Oppia Platia Domitia, and Trajan's first wife was Tacitus' sister, Oppia. Afterwards, Trajan married Arius Piso's daughter, Claudia Phoebe Pompeia Plotina. Pliny was a friend of Arius's and had already been related to the family before he married Arius Piso's granddaughter, Calpurnia. And Suetonius was Arius Piso's grandson by Claudia Phoebe and her first husband, Rufus. Later, Suetonius became the emperor Antonius Pius. Okay? And oh yes, let's not forget that the other fellow who would have been Josephus' son and was Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr was Arius Piso's son. Fabius Justus Calpurnius Piso. All the knowledge that humanity would have had to enable it to get past the stumbling block of Christianity was lost when Arius Pisos burned it. So, they were trying to cover their tracks, right? After doing so, Arius and his family went about building a whole new world centered around Christianity. They synthesized ideologies for the masses while they themselves were above the laws that they made. I mean, think about it. It's the same thing that's happening today. You have the 1%, the elitist, and, putting it on TV, all these things that we see and hear, total lies. Now, we have internet and we have access to information, but back in that time, back in the beginning of the Common Era, the 60s, there was no internet, there was no TV. It was what was told at the town square, and what you were told, you just had to take it and believe it or not and get killed, because that's just how it was. The Roman Empire was, a force to be reckoned with. And, a lot of people, what happened in history. So they did things secretly to enhance their capacities while stifling that of the masses. Humanity had already known that the earth revolves around the sun instead of vice versa. So, humanity kind of already knew different things. But the family was busy setting the clock of wisdom back for the masses. Arius Piso's grandson, who was the brother of Suetonius Antonius Piso, wrote as Ptolemy and held our knowledge of astronomy back 1800 years. His real name was Flavius Arrianus, and he also wrote as Arian and Apian. Written the following pages. As we go further, I'll give profiles of the various family members along with genealogical charts showing lineage and their respective places within the family. So we're going to talk about who wrote what, when. So originally it was agreed to by the family that Christianity would only last a certain amount of time and that all should be eventually revealed. But then they realized that if they told the masses how they'd been fooled, there'd be an uprising and the family members who were ruling would be subject to the wrath of the masses. So instead of, vice versa. So Antonius Piso was careful to treat the masses kindly, lest they found out and would kill him and his family. Isn't that ironic? But I guess, if you tell a lie long and hard enough, people believe it, right? Another thing that ought to raise our suspicions is the illusion that it put out to the general public of how long it was that the New Testament was written and that the people of that time were stupid and that there is little left for us from that time. I mean, there's really not much. So there's going to be, I'll give you a couple of resources in the description below for you can do your own research. Now we're finding a lot more. People are putting the pieces together, which has been great. So part of the family wanted to be lax in pushing Christianity, especially once they had all but destroyed the Jews. I mean, they just pummeled the Jews and, I guess they were afraid they were going to get caught and found out. And so, you'll find that there was some feuding within the family as well. So on the scale of control by emotionalism, they set as the new enemies of the emotionally enthralled Christians, the Stoics. So they created the Stoics as well. Okay. When they first laid the groundwork for Christianity, they cultivated the minds of the masses with superstition. There are several instances of Josephus, Suetonius, and Ptolemy. Some of the later bishops who were family members omitted the revelation in retaliation to Julius, who wrote it. So who wrote Revelation, the book of Revelation? That would be Julius. For opposing the family. It was like a thorn in their side. So Cyril, Bishop of Jerusalem, in 340 omitted Revelation from his canon. So you'll come to see, and we're going to read about some councils, how they came up with the books. So in 364, the Council of Bishops assembled in Laodicea and agreed to remove Revelations, the book of Revelation. In 370, it was reinstalled in the catalog by Bishop Epiphanius. But 5 years later, Bishop Gregory Nazianzen omitted it again. And in 380, Bishop Philastrius omits the Revelation from his canon. Why would they want to omit Revelations? Why did they want to get rid of it? It's a perfect ending to the Jesus story, but it contained more hints and allusions concerning the authorship of the New Testament than any other book. It contained the famous reference to 666, the mark of the beast. I hope you guys know by now, 666 in Christianity is the for the Antichrist symbol and all this other stuff. But in Judaism, it's not like that at all. I mean, not at all. Christianity is the only religion that has that number that is just so bad. And so the book of Revelation was really telling for them, and they kind of went back and forth because they're like, are we going too far with this book? Oh no, let's just keep it away from the people. No, put it back in. So, all right. So, I hesitate to say exactly how the Jews of today fit into this, except that I hope that after reading all that I have to say, after listening to all that I have to say, that you will understand. So in the Talmud, there are many allusions to the Pisos and what they did. So you have to think about, why did the Jews, number one, reject the Messiah? Why to this day are they rejecting him? What do they know? Because obviously they know something that we don't know as Christians ex-Christians, okay? It's their book. The Tanakh, it was in Hebrew. They're very familiar. They spent their lives studying the Torah and the Tanakh. They would know. They would have questions, just like they still have today, and they're looking and figuring things out, but why did they totally reject Christianity? Well, they knew. They knew. So this is why the Jews, the Jews are the chosen people. They are the witnesses to what the Pisos did. So in the Talmud, there's references like the horse, i.e. Piso, wrote Matthew. And Rabbi Josephus wrote Matthew. When you have read this book, these seemingly obscure remarks will start to make sense. So when you have read, the Talmud and you start to look, you will see why the Jews went through all the things that they did. And this is a reference from Jewish Expressions of Jesus, Weiss Rosarine, KTAV Publishing House, New York, 1977. So that's the reference for that quote. The literature of the Jews hold much of what is needed to unravel the mystery of the Gospels. That is, that the Pisos wrote them. Though the Jews lost the war with the Romans, many of them knew what the Romans were doing with these Gospels. They knew. That's why they rejected it. And it's funny and ironic how in the New Testament says that the Jews were blinded, yada, yada, yada. But the Jews knew at that time what was going on. And that's the reason why they were trying to get rid of them. Because these elitists were scared out of their wits that they were going to be found out. And they weren't, obviously, because here we are thousands of years later with a fake religion. Okay, so I lost my place where I was. Just give me a moment. Okay, so much of this information was kept, but it was hidden. It is present within the Jewish customs, tradition, literature, commentaries, holidays, and prayer books. Most notably in the first Babylonian Jewish prayer book, the Amram Gaon, and later in Parthia and the Saadia Gaon. So the Jews knew what was going on, and they kept it they had to be very secretive about it, because this is why for years Christians have been trying to burn their books, call them blasphemers and all these things, because they know that. And we're going to talk about, actually the next section here is about an inner circle. So we're going to talk about that inner circle. So most of the world as we know it is based firmly upon the idea and acknowledgement of a Christian God, okay? There's only a small portion of people who know about the deception, and they are called the inner circle. And they consist of people with both good and not so good intentions, okay? So if you're here on this video and you're watching, then we're part of the inner circle. We're on the good side, trying to tell people, hey, get out of that religion. It's not even real. So some of these people in the, some of them proclaim themselves to be Christians, even though they know the origin of Christianity, such as scholars, popes, evangelists, and rulers of countries. A lot of them know, okay? But you know what? Christianity is a big money maker. They make millions and millions and millions of dollars. It is a great business model, so why would they want to stop it? So the first person to write about this publicly, as far as this research goes, the first person to actually write about this was a man named Bruno Bauer. His work pointed to the Romans as the authors of the New Testament, and most specifically Josephus, okay? His best book on the subject was probably Christ and the Caesars. It was at the time it was called Christus und die Caesaren, published in Berlin in 1877. As far as I know, there are not as many translations of his book in English. Okay, so that was back in Berlin, 1877. The second person to write about this subject publicly is a man named Abelard Reuchlin, 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 who in 1973 started piercing together his theory that the Romans who wrote the New Testament were mentioned and alluded to in Jewish history and tradition. Abelard is fluent in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Yiddish. He also knows Latin and Greek. So Abelard wrote the first edition of the true authorship of the New Testament in 1979. Second edition was written in 1986. The second edition was a 27-page booklet. The history that even the best of scholars today rely upon is the history of the Roman side, the winning side of the war. That's the history that we go off of, and we're taught. There was history been written by those who were being destroyed by the Romans, the Jews. Guess what? They have a history, and they have it in their writings as well. But hardly anyone but the Jews ever read it, because it's in Hebrew. So unless you read Hebrew, you don't know. So again, why haven't the Jews accepted Jesus as Lord? Well, because their own writings tell them exactly what happened during that time. You know, the rest of us, English speaking, any other language speaking, got duped into this religion of Christianity because the winning side wrote it. Okay, so, all right. So Flavius Josephus was a pen name of Arius Calpurnius Piso. So a lot of people will look at Flavius Josephus and be like, oh, what a good Jew, and he left us history. And actually, the only ones that revere his work are Christians. The Jews have rejected his work because they knew who he was. The true deception. They knew in their own writings, they've been passing it down. Again, why don't Jews believe and understand and want to know that their Messiah already came? Who's being deceived? Christians? Yeah, they are, not the Jews. So the author explains the many pen names used by the Pisos in both the public and their secret Christian writings. We're going to explain the code system used. 2,000 years ago, no copyright system existed. Therefore, the Pisos inserted codes and allusions was represented themselves to ensure that no later author could claim their work. The code system which the Pisos used included sounds, animal allusions, and three basic numerical code systems: Greek small numbering, large numbering, and the sequence system. These are all refinements of Pythagorean mathematics. So the inner circle, many of the world's great scholars, poet, laureates, writers, politicians, dictators, theologians, church leaders know the great secret. Shouldn't you? So they had a code, and hence that's why, they use different numbers to tell the others of what they're doing, right? It still happens today. So if you could join a club, why not the most exclusive club that has ever been, the Inner Circle? Writers who have known some of this information have included Boccaccio, Bacon/Shakespeare, Cervantes, Rabelais, Tolstoy, Milton, Spencer, Tennyson, Thackeray, Kipling, the Brothers Grimm, Stevenson, Poe, Burns, Browning, Noyes, Lewis Carroll, A. Conan Doyle, Verne, Baum, Tolkien. So those are just some of the names. Some of them you might know, some of you don't know. Some of these names I didn't even know. People who knew what was going on. So doesn't it seem at least slightly suspicious that the New Testament shouldn't be written, should be written at a time when Rome was at war with the Jews? Like, isn't that, it's kind of suspicious, right? And that the public history that we have from that time is from the winning side, the Roman side. So this is a chronological account of not only how history was rewritten, but also why the New Testament was written and by whom and how and for what purpose. This tells the real story of biblical times between 19 CE and 192 CE. First, we know that there is a hidden war going on, and it is now in progress. And it is a result of conspiracy that was initiated back in the 1st century CE. So here's a partial list of original conspirators. Seneca, Galba, Pliny the Younger, Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Arius Calpurnius Piso, aka Flavius Josephus, Vespasian, Titus, who was Vespasian's son, Justus Calpurnius Piso, aka Justin Martyr. Okay? These were the original conspirators. Those guys right there, those names that I just mentioned, were the ones who wrote the Gospels. So the same name as the Lucius Piso, whose daughter married Julia's sister, right? Lucius Calpurnius Piso Cisoninus. That earlier Lucius Piso was in fact also a Caesar. He was Julius Caesar's father's brother. That's right, his uncle. And Lucia Calpurnia Piso was his first cousin. Mark Antony was Julius Caesar's second uncle. Okay, so, well, for one thing, in the Roman aristocratic way of life, this was their whole life was at stake. So it was one in which slavery played a major part. The Roman way of life was one based on power and control. The control of other people. Just like it is today. Nothing has changed. The Jewish way of life was not tolerated, did not tolerate any slavery because it went against the teachings of the Hillel, and who was a Pharisee. So after the death of King Herod, the Herodian priests were losing control of the Jewish masses because of the new Pharisaic party of humanistic Jews. So the Pharisees were, wanting to teach the truth, and that's why the big push and propaganda against them. So Philippians 3 verse 12, be all of you subject one another, having your conversion honest among the Gentiles. So that's just a reference, kind of like given away. At first they tried to give this new religion to the Jews, new wine in old bottles, but when the Jews wouldn't accept it, they went to give it to the Gentiles, new wine in new bottles, and destroy the Jews. The proportion of Jews in the Roman Empire by the late 50 CEs was over 20%. Okay, so that's a pretty significant amount of Jews. As Jews, they were a threat to the Roman way of life, the aristocratic life. So a few conspirators in the hierarchy decided to give the Jews a new religion, Christianity. So how do you get rid of your enemy? You sometimes can't really kill them off, but you just give them something different. Refocus over there. Hey, you like all that kind of stuff. Let's give you, something they desire, whatever. So they made this new Christian religion. They synthesized a new religion and based it upon the already existent Jewish religion and used the Jewish books. And they customized it to fit the Roman way of life. So they manipulated the Torah and the Tanakh. But it was so sly that, if you weren't studying the Torah and the Tanakh, you could easily fall into the deception of Christianity. And that's what ended up happening. Because the people back then, it's not like today where you can go on your shelf and go get your Bible and fact check people. They didn't have it in writing. So, it was all, transmitted orally. They were learning the Torah and the Tanakh. So it's not like everyone had it written down. When you went to synagogue, they opened up the scrolls and they read from the Torah, and that's how the people learned about it. But other than that, that was pretty much it. So the New Testament books were written after the supposed fact, so that it was easy for them to be self-fulfilling. Yeah, you heard that right. So after the temple was destroyed, after all these things happened, then they wrote the New Testament, pointed back at it, but told the masses, oh, this was written prior. Okay. First Christian book written was Marcus, which was the prototype for the book of Mark that was written by Arius Piso. Marcus was written by Lucius Calpurnius Cisoninus Piso in about the year 60 CE, perhaps closer to the year 62 CE. or Marcus, the first Mark, okay? Not the book of Mark that we have today. Even theologians agree that chronologically Mark could come before Matthew. The main conspirators at this time included Seneca, Galba, Lucius Piso, Gaius Piso, and Seneca's nephew, Lucan the poet. Arius Piso was 28 years old in 65 CE, so a young guy. The book, or Marcus, was given to the Jews, who soon rejected it, obviously. They rejected the whole thing back then. Of course, they maintained a company of their own private slaves, which they used as scribes to make copies of their book to distribute to the masses, after which the slaves were killed. Kill the messengers, right? This practice was copied after the Egyptian pharaoh's practice of killing the slaves who worked in the inner chamber of the pyramids. So, wow, so they were just doing what Pharaoh used to do. For these slaves also worked on the inner circle of the triangle, the new Trinity. So next, the book, or Marcus, was given to slaves and Gentiles who bought it hook, line, and sinker. There you go. The Jews were like, we ain't having it. Nope. This new group of followers were called Gentile Christians, or non-Jewish Christians. In 66 CE, Arius Piso deliberately provoked the Jewish revolt so that he could pave the way to destroying the temple, because the Jews were not accepting his uncle's story, or Marcus, which was intended to pacify the Jews. About the year 70, Lucius Piso wrote another book called Matthias. The two books that went to the Logia, Marcus and Matthias, were written by Lucius Piso. Lucius Piso died in the year 73 CE. That was when Arius Piso inherited his works. By the year 70, Arius Piso and Titus's army had destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. Somewhere between the year 70 and 75, Arius Piso rewrote his uncle's books and gave his uncle's fictional Messiah the name Jesus. It was Arius Piso who thought to name the carrier Jesus because it was Josephus, who was the father of the fictional Jesus in the story. Are you making the connection here? I hope you are. Now, when writing the books of the New Testament, Arius borrowed the characteristics for his characters from earlier prototypes. So he already had, some writings from Lucius, so he was just going off of the draft. The character for Jesus and even the concept of the Trinity was borrowed from the already ancient Egyptian equivalent of the Holy Family. Okay? Jesus, virgin birth, resurrection from the dead, nothing new. It was totally pagan. There were many gods in the ancient world that were born of a virgin, resurrected, son of a virgin, all these things, right? Nothing new. And that's why the pagans, gulped it up and accepted it as they did, because it was something that they already knew. It was nothing new to them. But the Jews were like, y'all are crazy. Okay, so here's their connection between the pagan gods / names in the New Testament. Osiris for Joseph, the father who was a lesser god than the son. Isis is Mary, the Virgin Mother, because Isis was a Virgin Mother as well. Their son Horus, who was the equivalent of Jesus. They even made a Horus Caesar as a joke in Egypt. So this was a reference from the Nile, Emil Ludwig, page 417. That's for your reference. Also, some of the characteristics used to create the Jesus character and some of the sayings that they used were borrowed from Hillel the Pharisee. So they were just mocking the rabbis at the time. This was also too obvious to the Jews, and especially to the rabbis of the day, who for the most part were relatives, descendants of Hillel. These same were also relatives distant of the Pisos, for they were also were descendants of King David, very distant. Okay, Arius Piso used Hercules to contribute the following attributes and characteristics to his Jesus character. So Hercules, in the Greek god, These were his characteristics, right? The Prince of Peace, that was the title he had, Hercules. He had a virgin mother. A father who was a god. He too was the begotten son of his god father, Father God, right? Hercules too was called Savior. He had the title, the Good Shepherd. Hercules also died and went for a brief visit to hell, Hades, after which he then ascended to heaven. He went to heaven, right next to his daddy. By 75 CE, Arius Piso had revisited the book Marcus, and we know now that book as the book of Mark of the New Testament. Of course, with all of these things going on and with new conspirators on the rise, the conspirators didn't want to attract any suspicion, but at the same time they needed a system in which they could not only keep track of their own propaganda, but also keep their identity secret, yet still be able to claim authorship for both prosperity and their own egos. So we're going to go into a little bit of who wrote what here. So the epistles of Paul the Apostle to Seneca and Aeneas Seneca, 65 CE. For you know when and by whom, at what seasons, and to whom I must deliver everything which I send. Reference the Apocryphal New Testament. The fact of the matter is that Seneca did not live long enough to see any other Christian book or propaganda except Marcus, the prototype for the book Mark. The epistles of Paul, the apostle, were written by Justus Calpurnius Piso, and realizing this, it would also be realized that Seneca had long been departed. So Justus didn't start writing until the late 90s CE, when he helped his dad and Pliny write Acts of the Apostles. Now that you've been briefed on the background of the conspiracy, here is a chronological synopsis. Germanicus Caesar was the nephew and adopted son of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. Germanicus was born in 15 BCE and died in 19 CE when he was poisoned by Cnaeus Calpurnius Piso, the governor of Syria. Cnaeus C. Piso was the father of Gaius, Marcus, and Lucius Calpurnius Piso. Cineas died in 20 CE. Gaius Calpurnius Piso was the father of Arius Calpurnius Piso, aka Flavius Josephus. The Pisos were Romans, and Arius was also technically a Jew by descent because his mother was a Jew, or rather a descendant of the Jewish hierarchy. His mother was Miriam, Aria the Younger, the great-granddaughter of King Herod the Great. Arius C. Piso was born in the year 37 CE. The younger Aria was the daughter of Aria the Elder, who was the wife of Paetus, Paetus, was involved in a conspiracy of Scriboninus against the Emperor Claudius in 42 CE and was condemned to death. His family. Ooh. Paetus' wife, Aria, did not wish to survive him and took her life with him by dagger. The younger Aria found herself in the same situation in the year 65 CE with her husband, Thracia Paetus Gaius Piso, but her husband begged her to live for the sake of their children. Philo of Alexandria died about 45 CE, and Philo mentioned Pilate in connection with the incident concerning the Roman shield, but he did not, nor could he, make any mention of Jesus or the Christian story. The works of Philo also suspect. If he was a real person other than Arius Piso, he was a relative of Arius Piso through the Herods of Judea. Philo mentioned Pilate, not Pontius Pilate, because Pontius was added to the name later, as Pliny was helping Arius write Luke. Arius Piso honored Pliny by adding the name Pontius as a variant to the name of the province in which Pliny was in charge, Pontus. So Pontius, Pontius, and then the province that he was in, Pontus, Pontus. Just one letter separates those two words. So that gave Pliny the nickname Pontius. In and around the year 55 CE, Rome started feeling the pressure of the new anti-slavery Pharisaic Jewish party upon the aristocratic Roman lifestyle. So obviously their numbers were growing. They were a pretty big population. They were feeling the pressure. So during the years between 55 and 62 CE, the Pisos' popularity and family status had once again risen to a very high aristocratic level amongst those patriotic Romans and the Jewish hierarchy, who we find there's a whole other teaching on that on the scribes of the time, because the Sadducees, the actual Sadducees had left by then, but the Sadducees that were left were hired by the Romans against the Jews. I mean, that's a whole different story. Who wanted to preserve that hallowed Roman institution of slavery. And along with Seneca, Galba, and a host of others, the Pisos were likened to heroes by a majority of influential and powerful Romans. In about the year 60, Lucius Calpurnius Piso wrote Marcus, the prototype for the book Mark, which was later to be rewritten by Arius Piso. During the following 4 years, Lucius, Seneca, Persius, the poet, and miscellaneous other conspirators tried to get Nero to assist them in their plan and give the people a new religion to help preserve the Roman institution of slavery and regain control of the masses through religion, by which they could then easily manipulate them through the use of rhetoric and synthesize ideology. So they wanted to use the religion as a control mechanism, which Christianity does today. But these conspirators were thoroughly surprised to find that after giving Nero the details of the plan, he opposed it. Nero opposed the plan because his mistress at the time, who later became his wife, Poppea, Poppea, was pro-Jewish Pharisaic party. So she was a pro-Jew. So Gaius and Lucius Piso and their group planned to assassinate Nero in the year 65 CE. The attempt failed because Malichus told Nero about the plot in the hopes of receiving a large reward, but Nero was so shook with sudden terror that he mistook Malichus's greed for loyalty. Nero started questioning all the conspirators that Malichus named, then in turn named even more. So Gaius Piso was put to death in his own home. Remember, this is Thracius, Patius, and he were at home with his wife Aria the Younger. He committed suicide as ordered so that his family would not lose their holdings to the state. This order of suicide came from Nero to Gaius Piso just after Piso had been nominated senatorial successor that year. Seneca, Nero's rhetoric teacher, and Seneca's nephew Lucan, Berea, Sorantus, Phineas, Rufus, and miscellaneous others were executed by Nero. Nero exiled Gaius' son, Arius, to Syria, where he stationed him as governor, just as Arius' grandfather, Cineas Piso, had been governing of Syria also. Nero could not kill such a powerful figure as his relative Lucius Calpurnius Pisos Sicinius, oh my gosh, these names, because it was the namesake of the earlier Roman hero whose daughter named Julius Caesar. So Lucius Piso, one of the main conspirators, escaped with his life. Nero allowed this only to prevent an uprising. Lucius Piso married his dead brother's wife and adopted Arius Piso. Nero still went about weeding out conspirators. So Nero was trying to get rid of these guys. So that is just a quick synopsis of who wrote the New Testament. And I mean, there is so much information out there, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But I'm going to kind of go about and tell you who wrote what. There's a couple of things I just wanted to tell you guys about. So let's see here. It says, in the year 95, Alexander Arius Piso's first son, who was the wife of Pliny's wife, Calpurnia, died. Also in that year, Flavius Clemens, the first cousin of the Emperor Domitian, was executed on a charge of atheism. Many have wondered just what was meant by this. Remember who God was? Caesar. So to say that there was no God was to denounce Caesar, who just happened to be Domitian at the time. Then in 96, Piso, Arius, and Pliny assassinated Domitian, who was the second son and last main survivor of Vespasian. The dynamic duo, Arius and Pliny, were assisted in the assassination by Stephanus. Remember the martyr of Stephen, 1 Corinthians 1:16, who was a slave of the emperor's niece Domitilla. Then they appointed the elder Nerva emperor because he would allow the Pisos to do anything that they liked. He ruled for 2 years and died of natural causes. Also in 96, Piso started writing his Vita while helping his son. Fabius Justus, Justin Martyr, Calpurnius Piso, and Pliny the Younger write Acts of the Apostles, which they finished in about the year 100. In 98, when Nerva died, Trajan became emperor. Trajan was Ariopiso's son-in-law. He was married to Claudia Phoebe Pompeia Plotina Pisa. Martial, their relative, wrote about their marriage. Because Piso's daughter was an empress, she was allowed to write an actual portion of the New Testament. Because remember, the New Testament was the book of life itself. She wrote the last part of Romans. That was the year 100, when her brother Proculus was writing Romans. Pliny started writing 1 Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians, finishing those books in the year 103 CE. Also in the year 100, Pliny was starting up the first churches in Pontus and Bithynia. Now the Piso family really kicks into high gear. Between years 100 and 105, Pliny writes Titus and starts writing the epistles of Saint Ignatius. He wrote epistles to the churches that he started up. Can you picture this? Such was how Christianity was started. And Julius Piso wrote an epistle as Clement of Rome, Proculus as Saint Polycarp. In the year 105, Justus writes the Gospel of John. Justus wrote Timothy II in 107 CE while helping his son Julianus and his nephew Silanus, Silanus, to write Thessalonians 1 and 2, which they finished writing around 110 CE. During that time, Justus and Julianus also wrote Philemon, and Justus finished up James by himself in 110 CE. Between the years 110 and 115, Proculus Piso and Julius Piso were the family writers. Proculus was writing Peter 1 and 2, and Julius was writing John 1, 2, and 3, and Jude. By the year 115, all the books of the New Testament were written, except Revelations and Hebrews. Pliny the Younger, playing the part of Paul in Titus 1:2, quotes Epimenides the Cretan saying, all Cretans are liars. That is, a Cretan Greek saying that all Cretans are liars. Why would Pliny say that in the first place? Because he was teasing at the fact that the Pisos were liars, descended from the Greeks, and in fact directly descended from the brother of Alexander the Great. His brother's name was Lagos, which means the rabbit. Lagos, Lagos. Note, there is a noted similarity found in the Lord's Prayer, written by Arius Piso and Philo of Alexandria, reportedly the chief rabbi of Alexandria in Egypt. If you ask pardon for your sins, do you also forgive those who have trespassed against you? For in this remission is granted for remission. The remission of sin sounds familiar. So does forgive those whom have transgressed. Sounds a lot like that old devil himself, Arius Piso. Also, Philo of Alexandria was supposed to have died around the year 45 CE. The Jews didn't start calling teachers rabbi until after 70 CE. So here are some verses from the New Testament. The Son cometh. Matthew 4:3. If thou art the Son of God, speak that these stones may turn to loaves of bread. He then smartly answers his own remark in Mark 4:4, saying, man does not live by bread alone. Later in this is Matthew. In Matthew 7:9 he says, or what man is there of you who, if his son should ask for bread, will give him a stone? This is said again in Luke 4:3 and in 1 Peter 2:4. To whom coming as a living stone is indeed rejected by men. Who was who? Because of the work done by Guy Edward Fergahard Chilver on the works of Tacitus, we find that Gaius Piso was in fact a different person other than Lucius Piso. They were brothers. Lucius Pisos was a friend who Seneca corresponded with by using the name Lucius, Seneca's Epistles Moralis. These two were a team, much like Arius Piso and Pliny the Younger would become later. So Lucius Piso and Seneca were a team, and so was Arius Piso and Pliny the Younger. In fact, the writers themselves joke about that fact. One of Arius Piso's other name is Altrius. Pliny notifies Arius of the receipt of his book, like Seneca's letters to Lucius Piso, Arius Piso's uncle and adopted father. References for this is found in Pliny the 2, book 11, number 35, and Seneca 4, Epistulae Moralis 1, book 46. So these are all where you can find these at. So this Lucius Piso carried the same name as the father of the Calpurnia that named Julius Caesar, Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesonius. He had a villa at Herculaneum in the Bay of Naples. His brother was married to Arria the Younger, and together he had the only begotten son, Arius Calpurnius Piso. When Gaius Piso was killed by Nero in 65 CE, Lucius Piso married the widow of his brother and adopted her son, his nephew Arius. So you get the picture here. I mean, they wrote all the New Testament. It was just a slap in the face to the Jews. And, they were afraid it would get found out, and it never did, because as the lie got bigger and bigger, more people got involved in it, and now it's a matter of protecting it. Because guess what? With it, they can control the mass. They can control the people with that Christianity and, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Isn't that what Jesus says? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Don't question authority. Do whatever they tell you to do. Oh, yeah. By the way, go get your jab. You can't work. You can't do anything without it. I think that was back in the day, and everyone capitulated. I mean, it's all about control. So if you can put it in the minds of people and manipulate them, that's what they wanted to do, and it still goes on today. So this video is really for the ones out there, for Israel, who's out there, who's awakening. Because the scripture does foretell of Israel coming back. The lost 10 tribes will come back. And they're going to latch on to their big brother, Judah, to take them along the way and show them the truth, because they've been, inundated with idolatry and lies in Christianity. And so if you feel like that's you, then definitely reach out. I would love to hear, where you're at, what's going on, and that way we connect, and hopefully I can get you some more information. So see you next time.